good to see everybody in person again. It's actually been more than 2 years. It's actually been more than 2 years. It was February 2020. Then we all met in person. It's just, it's hard to believe. But it's great to see everybody in person, and we're going to get started. We weren't able to do this we didn't do this on Zoom. I guess we could have done it, but we didn't do it on Zoom for the last 2 years. But as we always used to do in our in-person meetings, we'll rise and start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Errol will lead us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was nice to say that. I was looking forward to it. Isn't that bizarre?
Let's go around the room and introduce ourselves, starting with our Father Alex.
Alexander Carlutzis.
Frank Trotta.
Matthew Cuomo.
Errol Toulon Jr.
Ahmed Palazzi.
Chris Hahn.
Linda Arman.
And Kevin Law. So we certainly have a quorum of the council. And Maury, who's here with your team today?
So my team includes, I'll just let them introduce themselves. Rachel, why don't you start?
Rachel Kavanaugh.
Hi, Justin Fincher from Advancement.
James Ryman.
Stacy Gropach, Dean for School Health Professions.
Cal Paz.
Bruce Cubic, UUP.
Adam Furman from Student Conduct and Community Statements.
Okay. Hello, Adam.
We have a bunch of people on.
We have people on Zoom.
We do have some people, members of your team.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, so we gotta, we'll just acknowledge that there's a bunch of members of your team on Zoom
Sounds good.
without going through. All
Yep.
right. Well, thank you for those participating on Zoom. Okay, as I said, great to see everybody in person. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from February 14th, 2022. Linda moves them, Chris Hahn seconds them. Any comments, additions, revisions, abstentions? No
Aye.
votes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Chair's report. I don't have anything specific to highlight other than I know we're going to hear some good news from Maury on things that she's doing and some new appointments that she's made. We're going to hear from Judy on the budget, and there are actually a lot of exciting things in the budget that just got approved from both economic development perspective and a SUNY perspective and a Stony Brook perspective. So we'll hear from Judy. We got a couple of good presentations, and we know there's a lot of neat things happening on strategic planning and middle stage accreditation and our Governor's Island competition. So I'm sure Maury's going to include all of that in her presentation. And so I'm just going to hand it over to Maury. And great to see you in person too.
Yeah, good to see you, Kevin, and good to see all of you since this is my first in-person meeting. Hard to believe. Yes. I've been here almost 2 years. This is the first time we've been able to get together in person. So thrilled to have you on campus. Before I get going, a couple of congratulations are in order to council members. Of course, to Kevin for being named chair of Empire State Development Corporation. We're thrilled about that. And to Linda for being named co-chair of the Long Island Regional Economic Development Corporation. So that is great on both of those. Thrilled to have you back on campus because it's been a great year on campus. After a year of campus being really very quiet, even though we had 5,000 students living here the, sort of year of COVID, you wouldn't know it, right? You walked around campus and it was quiet as could be. And even though 25% of our classes were in person, you wouldn't have known it. I mean, it really felt like a ghost town. But this year, campus has been alive again. We're back to near full occupancy in the dorms. Classes are all in person, and our student events that are normally part of our tradition have been there in full force this year. And it's really been extraordinary. And I really have to commend our undergraduate student government organization this year. They were amazing. They put together so many great events and they executed beautifully. So more recently in the spring season, we had Brookfest. which was a sold out basketball arena full of students, thrilled to be together for a great concert. Just Friday, we had the Roth Regatta. It was a chilly, but beautiful, sunny, windy day. But everyone had so much fun, right? So the tradition of really fabulous boats and people not quite making it to the other side, but still thrilled to be in that very chilly pond water. It was a really, really great event. And of course, we have a lot still coming up. We're in that season as we're approaching commencement. So we have Diversity Day coming up, a Campus Appreciation Day for all our faculty, staff, and students, and then, of course, commencement on May 20th. So thrilled to have everybody there. And our student affairs team has also spent the year in planning and redesigning the undergraduate experience, and they're going to continue building on those. And you can really see that energy. I mean, most importantly, this year, we totally redesigned the first year experience. And so it's kudos to Rick Gatteau and his team for the ways in which they've rethought how we approach bringing our first years to campus, housing them together, a week of orientation activities that were really grounded in getting them to build their communities from day one, focused both on those who were residential and those who were commuting. And I think you could really feel the difference in how our first years acclimated to campus this year. So really excited about the work that the team has done. In terms of appointments, last week you got the announcement from us appointing Dr. Carl Lejeune as our next executive vice president and provost. He will begin officially July 1, although he's immediately begun engaging with the campus community. He was here Friday to, meet with all the deans, to meet with everybody in the provost's office, to meet with the executive committee of the faculty senate, to meet with vice presidents. So really jumping in as quickly as he can. He's currently serving as executive vice president and provost at the University of Connecticut, where he's been for 2 years, and prior to that served in an interim role at the University of Kansas. Before that, he was Dean of Arts and Sciences at Kansas, and he spent most of his career at the University of Maryland, where he, started his career as a distinguished clinical psychologist. He works particularly on issues of underrepresented groups, and especially around issues of addiction. So we're thrilled to bring him to our campus, a really, really experienced provost with the leadership skills that we need at this moment, and a great team player. So he's really excited about what we're trying to do here. He's really excited about the students that we serve here. He is himself a first-generation college student. He grew up in New Jersey, so he's thrilled to be back in an area that feels very much like home. So
That's great. Congratulations, Maury.
Yeah. And you know what he said to me? You'll be glad to hear this. He said, "I begrudgingly admit that Long Island pizza is better than New Jersey pizza." So he's already identified several pizza places he's in love with and several delis that he's in love with. So I know he's going to fit right in here.
Yeah, we good. Pizzas, delis, and bagel shops.
I was just
on
going to
Long
say,
Island.
round it out with a bagel shop.
I had the pleasure of meeting Carl about 2 years ago, and then I had a nice chat with him on the phone last week. So terrific selection. Congratulations, and good luck. I think he'll fit in well with the whole team on TV and here in person.
Exactly. So let me tell you a little bit about how we are doing in terms of our graduation rates, because we continue to see upward progress there, which I am, of course, thrilled with. Our 4-year graduation rate has now risen to 66%, and our 6-year graduation rate is now at 78%. And that is extraordinary improvement over the last decade, but we should not be satisfied with where we are. Given who our student body is, we should well be up in a 6-year rate that's closer to 83 to 85%. So there's work for us to do to understand fully, like we've done the easy stuff. Now we're getting to the tougher bits of understanding why it is we are still losing students along the way. But the team is working together in a really collaborative fashion and is really laser focused on our continuing to improve our upward progress. One of the things that's extraordinary about this improvement that Stony Brook has achieved is that we have no equity gaps between our Pell and non-Pell students, right? And nationally, that's almost unheard of. So the work that's been done here has been done in this really thoughtful way, ensuring that all students are having equal access to the kinds of opportunities that ensure their success, but still work for us to do to continue getting everybody up to that level. We recently joined an initiative called the American Talent Initiative. This is a national initiative begun by, really came out of Bloomberg Philanthropies, starting in about the year 2015. It was a consortium of universities that are considered highly selective and successful in graduating students. So actually in 2015, we couldn't have joined because our graduation rates were not high enough, but they are now. And it's a consortium of over 100 universities. And the goal behind the ATI initiative is how do we get more Pell eligible students graduating from America's best universities? Right? And their goal was 50,000 additional Pell students graduating from ATI member institutions by the entering class of 2025. They were giving themselves sort of a decade to serve 50,000 more students. I can tell you they love us because we, just even in the last few years, have grown our Pell eligible students by 1,000. And if you look at what has happened at most highly selective institutions during COVID, their numbers have dropped. So ATI is only kind of treading water, and we and a couple of the other California large AAU institutions are also part of that group where the Pell numbers are growing. I don't know that we fully understand that, although I do think in COVID there was a little tendency for more people to stay closer to home. And so I think a lot of the state universities saw rising numbers where some of the privates, where you might be going a lot farther away to school, but they're still trying to figure out what that's about. So ATI sees us as one of their stars. And so at our last national meeting held at Bloomberg Philanthropies, Michael Bloomberg is still very involved in this initiative and very supportive. I was asked to give a presentation on the work we do here. And how it is over 10 years we've been able to make such a difference. And so that's great because that very much gets us out there on the national stage of people understanding what a special place Stony Brook is. That was in March. In April, I was asked to present to the AAU. The session was focused on affordability. And so they had 3 different universities speak about the work that we're doing around making college affordable to the students we serve. And I, again, focused on our success in serving our Pell eligible students. And again, another great opportunity for us to be on the stage with all of our AAU presidents. And I can tell you that many of them did not really understand what was really so special about Stony Brook. So that was a great opportunity as well. Let's talk about some of the really great things that have happened in the last few months. And this one very specifically linked to the advocacy of Senator Schumer on our behalf for an initiative called LNCATS. So LNCATS, the Long Island Network for Clinical and Translational Science, because of course we have to have an acronym for everything, is going to be a new network of regional biomedical research institutions that is intended to help us accelerate translational research, particularly focused on advancing clinical care. It'll be headquartered at Stony Brook, but it's, of course, going to involve our partners at Brookhaven National Lab, at Cold Spring Harbor, and the Northport VA Medical Center. So we're really excited about that. That was a $10 million federal grant in support of that effort. So that was really great. And more broadly, in the congressionally directed spending. Stony Brook did extremely well. We put in requests for $43 million and we received $40 million. Wow. So LNCATS was by far the largest of those grants, but in many other places, we received federal support for the work we're doing here. So that's really great.
Did we get much press on LNCATS? Yeah.
We did.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, we never get all the press we'd love to see, but we did get. Yeah.
Did Chuck, Schumer's office control the press and it came out under their name, or did it come out under Stony Brook's press office?
Both.
Yeah. All right, good. But it was great. When I read it in your report, it was exciting, but I didn't recall reading about it. You know?
In a longer story about federal.
Oh, I see. So it was part of.
He'll do another round on it.
Yes.
How you doing, Maury? You ready to do this event? Let's go. Come on. Sorry. Wake up to that voice every day for
Chris
6
can do
years.
that
You
because
can do
Chris
it
was
in
Chuck's
your-
Long Island rep. Let's move on. Let's move on.
Sorry.
We are being recorded, everybody,
Yes.
just a reminder.
And just a couple of faculty accolades. I mean, we have so many, but I'd really like to highlight the following because they are enormously important national awards. The first is that we had 4 faculty who were named Sloan Research Fellows. The Sloan acknowledgement typically goes to the nation's leading early career scientists. And we have a couple of other times had 4. It's really rare for an institution to have 4 in one year. And I will just note that our neighbors in the city, Columbia, down the road in Princeton, across the Sound in Yale, each only had 2. Just to give you a sense of what that says about how well this institution continues to do at recruiting great young faculty. So very exciting. And really, really significant, we have another Abel Prize winner on this campus, Dennis Sullivan, who is one of our mathematicians. The Abel Prize, given by the King of Norway, is essentially the Nobel Prize for mathematics. It is an extremely important prize. It is considered the most prestigious prize in math. It is the second Abel Prize that one of our faculty members has received in the last decade. John Milner was given this in 2011. So
awesome.
This says a lot about the continued strength of our math department, and that's really exciting. So certainly one of the things that I'm sure you all noticed in the last few months that has been really great for Stony Brook is that Governor Kathy Hochul named Stony Brook and Buffalo as SUNY's flagship institutions. It's a great word. There's a lot to be asked about what that really means. And she certainly spelled out a lot of what she was thinking about in her State of the State address. But again, that's her thoughts, and it's not exactly necessarily something that just because she said it, it means that's exactly how everything's going to function from now on. So there's more work to be done, and I suspect this is a multi-year process of really defining what it means. It was an acknowledgement of what is actually long been a fact, and actually which was historically the way in which SUNY was intended when it was established, that there were to be 2 important research and graduate institutions, and those were Buffalo and Stony Brook. They've both lived up to that in that they were both invited to join the AAU. And the AAU, of course, are America's leading research universities. And to be invited to join the AAU means that you have the demonstrated impact in the research that your faculty are doing, that you deserve to be a part of that organization. But naturally, being able to function at that level requires resources very different from what it requires to be a primarily undergraduate institution or a community college. And it's that piece that we need to continue to work on. How is it that Stony Brook and Buffalo are going to be able to remain the kinds of research institutions where they can remain members of the AAU, because that's going to require really significant investment. And it is an investment that we're going to need to keep advocating for, because nothing has changed in this year's funding that is in any way differential that allows us to make the kind of investments that we need. So some of the things that Governor Hochul laid out in her expectation was that she believed that the flagship institutions, and maybe even the other university centers, ought to be able to charge a tuition cost that is different from the other institutions. Because universities like ours really have two primary ways of getting big revenue, the revenue it takes to run an institution, and that's state funding and tuition. And most universities, most states work at that from increasing both of those, right? Your tuition revenue and your state support. She and everybody else who would ever have a conversation about if there's ever an increase in tuition, that it would be predicated on the idea that we would continue to fund our students in the ways that we are aiding them in terms of financial aid, so that the students who need that assistance would still get the same amount of assistance they're getting, meaning they would not feel the increase of a tuition price. But for our students who are capable of paying it, it would be more revenue coming into the institution. We will see whether that goes anywhere. That is not under discussion for this year, because as you might know, the legislature controls tuition levels, and that was not anything they discussed. One would imagine that a university like ours ought to also have a fee-setting authority that is in line with the requirements, again, of running these much larger and more complex institutions. We are advocating this is really very much at the system level, that the system also acknowledge that we are a much larger and more complex institution and need to be managed somewhat differently from the other institutions. So, for example, allowing us to submit budgets for approval that are at, say, the VP level rather than down to the departmental level, that we could give them a budget for the year, we could give them actuals to budget at mid-year, and then again at the end, rather than every time we make a change in our budget having to work with SUNY for approval. We waste a lot of people hours in doing work that on a $3 billion plus budget, we obviously know how to manage. We would advocate for facilities decisions that are based on formulas related to industry best practice, to have decisions that live more at the chancellor and SUNY leadership and presidential level, rather than just with the staff of SUCF. And we have lots of reasons why we think that would be an improvement. In admissions, SUNY currently takes a portion of every application fee to our institution, almost all of which comes through the Common App. So that's a national application process that has nothing to do with the SUNY system. They keep a portion of our application fee in order to fund their SUNY system, which almost none of our students use. So we are advocating for our being able to keep our own application fees so that we can better fund our admissions office.
Makes sense.
We are advocating for academic program review to live at a higher level. We have very rigorous processes on our campus, as does Buffalo. All of this is in alignment with what Buffalo wants as well. And we are just asking that we get that higher level of scrutiny appropriate for research institutions with really robust approval processes, allowing for faster program review. Our students often want curricular innovation, and it shouldn't take us 2 years to bring a new degree program to market, which is what it's currently taking. There is much the state could do to be making investments in research that make us more competitive for recruiting faculty, such as the kinds of specialized equipment and research faculty that support our large-scale research efforts, that would allow us to build the kind of relationships with industry that we want to be able to build, that would give us opportunities in economic development and tech transfer. Investments like that in both Buffalo and Stony Brook would lift up the state in so many ways, and we will continue to advocate for those kind of investments from the state. Couple of other sort of updates. You've heard us talk about Governor's Island before. The RFP was recently issued. It is due in July. We are continuing our great work, and a shout out to Rose Martinelli, who's been really leading this effort for us with some of our great faculty and staff members. We continue talking across but not only the partners we already have, but growing our coalition of partners. And I know that we are going to put together a really great proposal for that. So I'm excited about that. So that's all I have in my report, and turn it over to you all for questions or comments or whatever.
Thank you, Maury. Terrific report. You know what? I've had, I've seen you, and we've seen each other in person numerous times over the last 2 years. I can't believe this is actually the first time you're here in person before the whole council. It's like weird because, I've seen you so many times, but I think the council will agree. Just hearing you deliver your report just confirms the decision we made 2 years ago that you are the right person for this job, and we're excited that you're here. So it's great to see you in person. Questions for Maury?
I just have a question on all these changes that you need from the legislature to be more efficient and effective. Have we considered maybe doing a coalition with Buffalo and asking for a pilot from the state? Give us a couple of years to see if this works. Let us do it.
Many of the things that were just articulated are really SUNY.
More than they are legislature.
Legislature is tuition. The rest of it is mostly
SUNY.
And so we are working together with Buffalo and SUNY.
Right. And we had actually begun this work prior to the governor saying anything, had begun working with Chancellor Malatras. And he was really very supportive of these ideas of sort of lightening some of those approval and bureaucratic layers on the youth centers. But then, of course, he left, and now we have an interim chancellor, and I think a lot of the work is slowing down as they await for the appointment of a new chancellor. And, we're a little caught in that moment.
At its best.
Yeah.
How realistic is it to achieve, half of those?
I think it has a lot to do with who the next chancellor is, frankly. Different system leaders sometimes have different ideas of how a system should be organized. I'll make the following observation. Different states have taken different approaches to organizing systems. In my mind, the most rational state in approaching a higher educational system of systems is California, where they put all their research institutions in one system. So that's the University of California system. Then they have all their sort of comprehensive teaching institutions in the Cal State system. Think Cal State Fresno and others. And then they have a community college system. Right. So they've really acknowledged in the creation of 3 different systems governed by 3 different boards, the different purposes. Higher ed needs all of these sectors. All of these different kinds of institutions play a really, really vital role, but they are very different, and they need to be governed differently, resourced differently, organized differently. And what's unusual about SUNY is that it has everything in one system, from community colleges through its AAU research institutions. It's really rare to mix community colleges. And that's real. There are very few states that do that.
Has that ever changed in the life of SUNY?
No.
No. So it's the same system that.
Yeah. Okay. But it's also a very young system, right? I don't know how New York got away with this, but they didn't have public higher education until the 1950s when it was created by Nelson Rockefeller. I mean, that's unheard of. Right. Every other state had public higher ed long before that, right? When the Morrell Act was passed in the 1860s, creating land grant institutions. They gave the land grant functions to Cornell, which is a private institution, right? And New York did not create public higher ed like everybody else did. So that's part of why, it's still adolescent in some ways. And I think what Governor Hochul is suggesting is, because she didn't just talk about Buffalo and Stony Brook, she talked about the entire system and the way in which it is time for New York to kind of take that next step and to think about understanding the differentiation that is needed for us really to serve all of our missions in higher education, and to use the money that we're investing in higher ed actually more efficiently for the kinds of impacts we want to be able to have in serving students.
Thank you.
Matt?
On the graduation rates, is there a difference, statistical difference between residential and non-residential students?
No, it's closer than you would imagine. So it's our biggest difference is men and women. We can slice it a whole bunch of ways. Our biggest difference is men and women. And that's more than 5 percentage points. So, I mean, it's a significant difference, and we've still got a lot to figure out about why our men are struggling. But we're working on that.
Interesting. Do you think that, I know with the pandemic, a lot of students were concerned about price, right?
Yep.
Especially since everything went online for such long periods of time. And it made the privates unappealing, right? Because their prices were so high for online. So people tended to want to go to the public institutions to catch up a little, right? Do you foresee that continuing as we come out of the pandemic, whereas students are like, well, maybe I don't need to pay more, or they're flocking right back to the privates?
Most of the privates this year saw application increases in the 20 and 30% range.
Wow.
And some of that is because students are just applying to more schools. I mean, it's hard to tell. It's hard to really tell, but the elite privates saw an explosion in their application
Yeah, I was
numbers.
wondering how
so
that was going to land.
I think it snapped right back.
Yep. Thanks.
Got it. All right. Well, thanks, Maury. Just a couple of things to add on to Maury's report, and things I probably could have mentioned in my chairman's report. First, Margot texted me. She got caught up, and so she apologizes, Margot Grunt, for not being here. Maury mentioned, the search for the new chancellor, and Chairwoman Tisch of the SUNY Board of Trustees asked me to serve on this business and labor advisory committee to the search committee. And so we've met with her and the search firm. And the search firm they're using to find the new chancellor is the same search firm we use to find this terrific president right next door to me. So I think they're in good hands. And so it was a honor, privilege to be asked to participate on that. Maury also led a couple of weeks ago a beautiful ceremony honoring our former president, Sam Stanley. They in the Ward Melville Library. If you feel like walking across the street to see it, there's the portraits of the former presidents, and so a portrait of Sam was unveiled, and Sam gave some really terrific comments. His family was there, and it was a neat event. So congratulations! It was very, I think, well received, and very nice of you to do that. And then, most important, this building that we're in. The reason why I was hoping we'd get a meeting in person is I wanted you guys to see this building. I took a tour when we did a grand opening of it last summer, but this building was probably it was a dump. It was a dump when I went here, and that was 100 years ago. And the fact that the students today have this beautiful building for all of their activities. Clubs and religious organizations and programs that they have here. Really, if you have time after the meeting, walk around. It's really a terrific building and something that's been in the making for a long time. And the fact that it's now operating and open is great news for the university, but especially for our students. So, we're going to continue with the agenda, and Judy is going to give us a brief update on the state budget and some of the highlights as it may impact our university.
I apologize, I had to walk out, it was from the White House.
And Judy, I always ask you, I'm going to ask you to speak up.
I'm just saying, I apologize, I don't do that.
Can you hear me on Zoom?
I'm working on something, so I have to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you guys are clicking it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll give you a quick little bit of background and then sort of where we ended up. And the beauty of this year, unlike the last many years, is that it's one in which we were not expecting to see cuts. It's one in which we actually entered the session with some bright spots, which was that Governor Hochul had already said that she had an interest in supporting SUNY and in supporting higher education generally, and that the budget was looking a lot better than it had been. And so rather than the years of just fighting not to be cut, we were able to sort of advocate for something else. Next slide. And so her budget, just a quick recap, her budget, she initially proposed $216 billion spending plan. She designated in her State of the State flagship. She included engineering buildings for Stony Brook and Buffalo. She included a $25 million commitment for Stony Brook for a neuro AI initiative. She had a $10 billion investment in healthcare and additional funding for SUNY, both in capital and a relatively small pot, but a nice new bit of funding for new faculty for both SUNY and CUNY. So all of that was in her initial proposal. She had no cuts to healthcare hospitals or SUNY, and so obviously, again, we were starting in a good position. Next slide. Just to remind you of what our priorities were. Clearly, number 2 was probably the most important, which is an increase in operating aid, but we also have advocated for years to close the TAP gap. Institutions were having to fund the difference between the TAP award, which had been set in 2010, 2011 tuition. We were having to fund the difference. $10 billion investment in healthcare we supported, her additional flexible capital we supported, and a number of other priorities. And again, the most important for us were the increases in operating aid, the increase in capital, and the engineering building. I mean, those were really our number ones, with some very significant requests on the healthcare side, one of which was to have the state, if possible, do both, which is to pick up debt service. That SUNY hospitals are the only state institutions that have to pay for their debt service. And the state operating aid to the SUNY hospitals had been cut a few years ago. And so those were 2 primary pieces that we were also advocating for. Next slide, please. The one house, both the Assembly and the Senate really did prioritize SUNY and SUNY hospitals in a way that we haven't seen in years and years and years. We worked very closely with leadership in Senate and House. We worked very closely with the Long Island delegation. They both dramatically proposed increasing spending above what even the governor had done. The Senate had a $600 million new deal for SUNY. The Assembly had a $1.2 billion multi-year capital plan for SUNY. I like that. Let's get that next time. And both houses included our request around debt service for the hospital. So that was a very positive way to come out of that part of this process, was to have suddenly the legislature actually saying, SUNY is important to us, and SUNY hospitals are important to us. Next slide, please. Because I'll tell you, in the past, just to give a little bit of history, in the past we'd get a lot of legislators who say yes, 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 but we wouldn't necessarily see that in their one-house budgets. So to see it in their one-house budgets, they're sending a message to the governor. This is something that's important to us. It's something that when we sit down at the table, we need to make sure that we're doing something for higher education and state hospitals. So the final budget came out about $4 billion over what the governor had originally proposed. But obviously less than what both Assembly and Senate have proposed. and the governor really made clear that she was concerned about the fact that the economy may dip in the next year. We shouldn't go too far over our skis and then have to cut back again. So they went certainly more than it's been. They also put in the state reserves at 15% in the out years. She made it clear that she wanted to basically fill up the rainy day reserves. I'm told this is the largest reserve allocation the state's ever had, which is a good sign for the future. Next slide, please. So where did it all end up? There is a $20 billion investment in healthcare. Her tenure became the sort of multi-year $20 billion. The bulk of funding is around retaining and supporting the healthcare workforce. And there's a $9 billion increase in Medicaid spending. There's money for distressed hospitals, which the legislature specifically called out SUNY hospitals as being part of that. And there's $1.2 billion for healthcare worker bonuses. I'll talk a little bit more about that, and money for safety net hospitals. So it is in many respects, a very positive budget for healthcare. Next slide, please. In terms of SUNY hospitals, we got the relief from debt service so far for 1 year. That's a great thing. It will save Stony Brook University Hospital $23 million in the coming year. We will certainly be advocating that this just be made permanent forever and ever. It also includes an additional $50 million. The legislature's been giving $50 million in capital to the 3 SUNY hospitals, and they included that. And again, they included us in the distressed hospital funding. And why is that important? Because there's a pool of money for that. And so we'd like to be able to access that in whatever ways that we're able to. Next slide, please. Around policy, there were a number of requests around Medicaid and the budget, and accepted the governor's Medicaid proposals, which really reversed an across the board 1.5% cut and increased Medicaid rates by 1%. So all in all, very positive around Medicaid. The bonuses, the healthcare worker bonuses, they're all 3, governor and the 2 chambers, took different approaches in their budget to what that is. We had really strongly suggested that we should be supporting workers at public hospitals. It's not what the language did. So it essentially says it applies to both public and private employers and employees. There's a significant burden actually on the employer that to determine which of its employees are eligible, and to apply under this sort of very tight time frame and very rigid rules. So I think that there'll be a lot of noise actually around which positions are eligible and which positions are not. But essentially, if you have it's an income threshold of $125,000, and there'll be bonuses, and I think there are one-time bonuses of up to $3,000. So really, I think the goal was to reward people who had spent so much time and energy with great impact on their lives working through the pandemic. And so that's why I think from the governor's perspective, it doesn't matter where you work. If you were a nurse, if you were an aide, if you were whatever, it doesn't matter where you work, public, private, it matters that you did that work during this very difficult time. And so that really is the theory, I'd say, behind this investment. There was adoption of in New York, of the federal no surprise billing law, and adoption of telehealth insurance parity. All of those mirrored what had been done through executive order during the pandemic. There are a couple other executive orders that things like temporary permits to practice for out-of-staters. You know, New York needed to bring in a lot of people to do various things during the pandemic. That was not included in this bill. Those bills still could come out, or should we ever need that again, we can do it by executive order. I think that the legislature was hesitant to put that in stone, cast that in stone. Next slide, please. So in terms of capital, there's additional. Did you? Just really want you to learn about healthcare.
We're past appropriations, right?
We're on enacted budget appropriations, yeah.
Is this correct?
No?
No,
It's not shown on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But Judy, why don't you just continue?
Yeah, I'll keep going.
We'll
So in
listen
terms
to you on
of,
the screen.
yeah, appropriations, there's an additional $225 million in the, what's called flexible capital program. There we go. And so there's sort of what I'll call general capital money that's for critical maintenance, and there's general capital money that's for rehabbing things on buildings, and then there's this flexible capital that actually also lets you build a little bit. And so the governor had proposed and the legislature accepted moving money that was in a SUNY match, so where our engineering building money was supposed to come from is coming out of this additional flexible capital. We don't yet know all of the details of how we will access that engineering money or how much we will actually get, but the governor said repeatedly in multiple places that she wants $100 million for Stony Brook and Buffalo to do their engineering building. So we will be hoping to wrap that up quickly. There's also a new $60 million pot of money for SUNY for what's called strategic investments. It could be around improving academic programs, increasing enrollment, modernizing operations. It hasn't yet been spelled out. I think that, and it's for the entire system, so 60 million doesn't necessarily go a very long way, but we will certainly be in there to try and get our share of it. There's also a $53 million pot for new faculty. Again, that's system-wide, but we will certainly attempt to get as much as we can to support our investment in our high-end research faculty. The one thing I will call out on the $53 million for new faculty, it's I think the first time that a state program says that it includes the benefits. So what that means is it's really not $53 million for new faculty, it's something much less than that. And so we will be advocating, should this program happen again, that we take that out. Finally, there's a significant amount of money for TAP, and they've accelerated closing the TAP gap, which for Stony Brook is about $8 million back into be able to use on other things in the institution. Next slide, please. There are a couple of small policy, not necessarily, yeah, we got it. Policy matters. So, for example, prohibited student debt practices, which really came outside of the budget, and which Stony Brook already does. We can't hold transcripts for students who owe us money, and so the legislature had actually passed that outside of the budget, and we made that change already. So there are a few policy pieces like that. Graduate Student Union had advocated strongly for prohibition on graduate student fees. That was not included. That would, SUNY estimates that would have been about a $14 million cost to institutions across the state. Here, for our graduate students who are GAs and TAs, we've already removed those fees for them. We give them a fee scholarship. So it is not actually really an issue here for those students. But I think that there will continue to be advocacy around that. Next slide. And then, again, there's call out for $100 million engineering building. There's significant amount, there's money, slight increase in our critical maintenance, which is what keeps this place sort of running without cracks on the floor and things like that. And there is spoken language around the neuro AI, and we will work to make sure that we get that neuro AI money as well. And the Veterans Home got a modest increase, and so sort of and then a bunch of what we call programmatic appropriations, our centers of excellence, clean water, NCI, all of those kind of held on to what they had in the past, which is very positive. Next slide, please. And so, again, I think that by and large, I have to consider it a good budget. There were no cuts. There are some increases in a number of places. There's some flexibility because we now have the TAP money back in our budget. But there's no increase in operating aid. There's no we need a significant increase in critical maintenance. Our buildings are very old, and $24 million just really truly doesn't cut it. We were doing okay when we had about $75 million. We're not doing okay when we have $23.6 million. We're holding on with, gum and fingers in the dike. So, we will continue. We are obviously going to work to get as much as we can on the two special funds in new money for SUNY. But I think that there's, more work to be done in the future around operating aid, increased critical maintenance, and we're on the third year of no tuition increase. And so at some point, something will have to give that's not a special pot, but that's an actual pot that's going into our coffers. So the only other thing I want to highlight here is the on the economic development side, obviously there's this $350 million fund for Long Island Venture Fund, and I think that I know many people on this table are interested in seeing where that goes, and I think that there's much that we can do to either partner with industry or to bring some of that money here for some of the work that we're doing. So it's another key piece.
Judy, it's actually called the Long Island Investment Fund.
Investment fund.
So it's not just for venture capitals and for maybe startups emanating out of Stony Brook. It's for a laundry list of potential projects, from biomedicine to sewers in Suffolk County.
Right. Great. Thank you. Last slide. And just, there were a few general policy things that came up. Acceleration of middle class tax cuts. You've heard about alcohol to go, ethics reform. So there were a number of other policy things which kind of get wrapped within and around the budget. And so all of those were happening, and some of those, bail reform, really get enmeshed with the conversation around where should we fund. And so, there's a lot of political work that has to happen to make sure that they can get a budget out, and there are always a number of policy-related matters that get wrapped within that. That is the speed version of the budget. Any questions?
Good. Judy's quite capable of extrapolating 7,500 pages of budget bills into a 15-minute presentation. Well done. Any questions for Judy? Bottom line, generally good news. A lot of good news for the system that we have to compete with or compete for. No cuts, but we're still fighting for our maintenance is what we need, and the items that Maury alluded to before, and the ability to set our own tuition, our own fees. Those are things we'll continue to work on, and we'll work on with the new chancellor. So, all right, thanks, Judy.
Great. Yeah, so if I could just put a reminder fine point on budget pieces. Every year we are obligated to pay the contracted salary increases that are rightly earned by our faculty and staff. And the cost of that is $10 million a year compounding. So that grows, right? 1 year it's 10, next year it's 2.1, et cetera. That's 10 million either new dollars you have to find, or you have to make cuts in order to be able to have 10 million to put into additional salaries. And this has been the long-running challenge for a budget at an institution that has not seen an investment in operating support for more than a decade, right? And there are only two places that money's going to come from, and that is either increased operating aid or tuition or some combination of those two. And that is still not in there, right? And the relief on TAP helps because we've been putting 9 million of our own dollars into TAP and Excelsior. But that just means, okay, this year we have enough to pay increases almost, not quite, like it doesn't even cover that. And what do we do next year? Right. And we have other inflationary costs we have to pay. I mean, salary increases are always your largest inflationary cost, But every year we have to pay more for the software that, runs every system that we run. And every year we have to pay more for the subscriptions that all of our faculty and staff use in the libraries, and on and on. The other thing I want to make an important point about, because it's really, really significant, because this campus was first occupied in 1963 and saw the vast majority of its buildings built in the next 10 years. Every single one of those buildings is at failure. And our buildings, because they are mostly to support STEM research, are so much more expensive than just an average teaching building. We have more deferred maintenance than any other SUNY institution, if I remember right, by like 3 times. Buffalo's in much better shape than we are, just as our peer example. So $25 million a year, I mean, she's being very generous to say it allows us to, we're not treading water at 25 in critical maintenance, right? We have hoods that cannot draw the chemicals they need to draw out to keep our researchers safe. We have HVAC systems failing. We cannot support the level of science we need to do in the buildings we have. And that is both in the West Campus buildings and in our health science schools. So it is a critical issue, and that's when we talk about reform at SUCF, that's a lot of what that's about. They like formulas that spread like butter without the kind of proper recognition of the kind of work you're doing in the buildings and how deteriorated those buildings are. And we have really serious deferred infrastructure problems. So maybe our next meeting should be in one of those buildings instead of in our newly renovated Union.
No,
right?
it's
On a rainy day.
It's important.
Exactly.
It's important because I know I brought this up a couple times at different meetings that we have all this funding for these beautiful new buildings, and so you have the decrepit and then the brand new luxury buildings, and it's like a mixed message on campus. Right?
And that's
the
The problem with the legislative.
Legislatively driven. And,
Nobody wants to spend money on maintenance. They want to name our
I understand. It's just, brutal.
Right.
Because
it's brutal. And sometimes we're renovating buildings where it would actually be cheaper to tear them down and start from scratch. But because the legislature so controls whether the money can be spent on, maintenance and renewal as opposed to new, sometimes you end up actually wasting money from that. So it's one of our challenges.
So that's what we should do. Tour them on all the bad buildings.
Oh, it's a delight.
No, very good. All right. So
wear your hard hat is all I'll say.
We have 3 other presentations we're going to try to get done in 25 minutes.
Okay.
But I want the record to reflect that Reverend Michael Smith has joined us. Michael, thank you. And somebody else many of you probably haven't met yet because he also joined us during COVID, is our new advancement person who took over the role that Dexter Bally used to play here. And Justin Fincher, I've had the pleasure of meeting with a couple of times. He's doing a terrific job so far.
Thank you. So I'll do this in 83 seconds, I think is what we're targeting. Great. Good to spend time with you all this morning. I thought I'd do a couple things. First, kind of set us within the national context of philanthropy today and kind of the growth there, what the team looks like today to position against that growth, and then where we're ultimately headed as an organization for Stony Brook. So you can see that giving as a proportion of GDP kind of crested 2% of GDP in, I think, the mid-90s, and has really stayed standard or above that since the 90s. So generally, philanthropy doesn't fluctuate too much relative to GDP nationally. And what you see is that philanthropy has actually continued to grow and pretty significantly in certain areas. So individuals, and what's a little bit harder to see here, and I'll show you on the next slide, is that in particular foundations are huge growth areas for philanthropy, particularly to education, and continue to grow even during COVID. And for us, it's really good news in terms of philanthropy. You see lots of fluctuation in types of the sectors of where people are making gifts today, with education and public society benefits being those large entities that people are making more and more gifts to on an annual basis. You also see here foundations as a growth area. And what's interesting there is that people are making gifts to foundations, which foundations are increasing their giving to education as well, right? So another pathway for us to really make sure that Stony Brook is present and really in front of those foundations. So oftentimes when people think of advancement, they first say, I don't know what that is. The second thing they think is that that's fundraising. And I just want us to continue to broaden our aperture to think about advancement as advancing the relationships on behalf of Stony Brook, the reputation for Stony Brook, both locally and nationally, and also driving resources for Stony Brook long term. So the way in which we're doing that, next slide.
Sorry. I was just giving this Good.
Great, thanks. So we've taken our team to really look at that overall experience that someone encounters as an alum or as a constituent of Stony Brook. So our Alumni Association in partnership with Ahmed here, kind of existed by itself, I would say, previously, right, and had pretty limited resources. We've connected our events team, our annual giving team, our donor experience teams now to think holistically about what an alum experiences throughout their lifetime with Stony Brook. We're just getting that work started, but what you're going to see is just more resources focused on broad-based engagement. Stony Brook's story is incredible, and I would say is really successful because of a lot of key relationships that have driven philanthropy here long-term. Our opportunity for our next phase is to continue that growth, but also to think about the future generations of individuals who are going to be committed to Stony Brook. And that takes a lot of experience work and kind of starting those relationships. The next areas are really driving that major gift revenue for the institution, as well as principal gifts, which are gifts of $5 million or more to Stony Brook. That work is, as you can imagine, very detailed and exists across the enterprise, and gifts at that level tend to take into account multiple units, both across medicine and the university, so we have a team that's squarely focused on driving that for the institution. Then really how we're telling our story out to the world and bringing new people into Stony Brook's relationship long term, and then our team that's really helping drive all that operational work. So as we think about fundraising, just plainly, right? Fundraising and philanthropy is not about the past, it's about the future, right? And in order to shape the broadest future, we need the biggest vision possible. So as we go through strategic planning this year, we're looking at that with an eye towards what of that can be driven by philanthropic propositions that help take us into the future. Giving is about, you give to people, right? Think about the last gifts you made to something. It's usually because you have a relationship with someone. And so we're really focused on what that front line looks like for our institution and how we're building those relationships long term. Lastly, I'd say here that collaboration, right, across our individual colleges and units, we need to tell the one Stony Brook story and how that relates to the people that we're trying to engage. So what you're going to start to see, sense, and feel is really a focus on creating joy for the people that we serve, right? If you're making a gift to this institution or you're engaging in the life of Stony Brook, we don't want that to feel like a transaction, right? We want that to feel like a lifelong relationship. When was the last time you made a gift and you felt joy because of that? That's an aspiration for us, but that's what the team is focused on, so that when you're giving your hard-earned dollars to Stony Brook, right, that you feel that deeper emotional connection to the place. We want to make this big place also feel small. It's really easy to feel like I don't really know which piece of Stony Brook I'm talking to today. That's the job of advancement and of our leadership to really figure out how we're talking to you as someone connected to the institution versus the person sitting next to you. And ultimately, we don't want to tell you what we're going to do. We're going to show you the impact of what we are doing, right? So we're not going to tell you what's going to happen 3 years from now. We're going to show you today how philanthropy is helping drive Stony Brook forward. And finally, just kind of lifetime engagement and also featuring those faces over spaces. So you might see brochures that previously had a lot of buildings and beautiful architecture, right? We want to show you the community that you're a part of. And again, you give to people, not to institutions. So we're not ready to start talking about any type of public campaign, but I just thought today, since we had you for a minute, just to get us thinking about this, because we'll have to do this conversation in more detail over time. But a campaign is not just a dollar goal, right? A campaign is an organized way in which Stony Brook as an institution can tell a coordinated story to a broad base of constituents. So it's a marketing structure, right, to drive urgency and clarity. So again, I told you people give because of vision. And they also give because there's clarity, right? We know what's important to us, and there's urgency to that. So that's what a campaign is, and that's really what Mari, the senior leadership team, and our boards are really going to drive towards over the coming year. And so we're going to start to think about not just, again, a big dollar goal. That's the question I get asked the most. Well, we're not in a campaign right now. What's the next campaign, and how much is that going to be? That's not important right now, right? What's important is for us to get really clear on what's important to us and to start to develop those targets that we think are going to drive the vision forward. And it's not just the dollar goal. It's about building participation across the life of the institution. We're going to look at things like foundations, for example, and how do we double that impact, because we know that's an area where Stony Brook can have a difference. Corporate engagement, our grateful patient model across Stony Brook. There's clear things within that that will help drive our growth as well. And ultimately, we're only as good as our volunteer corps. And so I really look forward to working with you all to start to think about how 7 years from now or 10 years from now, right, the number of volunteers who are engaged in the life of Stony Brook's philanthropy is double, triple what it is today. So I hope I made up a few minutes there, but happy to take any questions that anybody has.
No, that was great, Justin. And you ran a great gala the other night. Went to it in the city.
Team
Well
sport.
done. And Lori, how much did we raise?
2.3
Yep,
million.
for student
Student
scholarships
scholarships.
directly to students.
Yeah, very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Off to a good start. And anybody have any questions for Justin? No? But we do get your emails and your updates, and keep them coming. We like to be kept informed of the project, the progress, and the success. So continued good luck to you.
Great.
Well, I
Thanks
just
very
want to comment, Justin and I met. I have to commend him because I do fundraising for the Archdiocese, and for the Greek Orthodox community. I would say philanthropy is a Greek word. It's a Jewish art. And I have to deal with people like John Katzimatidis, and John's a very close friend of mine, multi-billionaire. But it's very hard to get them to give. You got to create a vision. People give to vision. Wealth always chases vision, never catches up to need. And Justin really has a great program ahead of him, and I'm just enjoying listening to that. And I want to be able to integrate that from where Michael and I are out in Southampton Hospital. We're going through that fundraising program. I'm part of that with Howard Lorber and all those. But there's such wealth out there, and so we got to connect it with Stony Brook. But I look forward to being part of this and helping in any way I can.
And that's such a great line, and Justin, we should incorporate that into your materials. Wealth always chases vision, but never
catches up to need. That's a
Is that a
principle.
Father Alex proverb?
No, it's actually Jerry Panis, who is he's of Greek heritage, but became Episcopalian many years ago. But we used to have lunch together, and I used to say, this guy's a sage. He became an interim president for the Red Cross. He raised billions of dollars throughout his career, and he was a consultant. And it was his, and I said to myself, that is so true. Wealth always chases vision, never catches up to need.
Yeah, great line,
Yeah,
so true.
I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Justin, thank you.
Thank you all.
Justin.
Thanks for your support.
Okay, next up, we have Stacy Jaffe-Gropak, who's going to give, she's a dean, and a presentation on the School of Health Professionals.
Yes, hi, thank you everybody. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm just to tell you a little bit about our school. My name's Stacy Gropak. I'm the Dean for the School of Health Professions. I joined Stony Brook in October 2019, right before the pandemic. And so I was just figuring out where my office was, and then had to not go there for a while. So we are on a road to some of the vision that was put before me as I joined Stony Brook. So I have a bunch of slides, but in the interest of time, I will abbreviate some of my comments. But just to tell you a little bit about our history. So the School of Health Professions was established by Dr. Edmund McTurnan when he was charged in 1969 with some other deans to establish a school that would accompany the Stony Brook University Hospital as it was being built, which opened in 1981. The original schools were the School of Social Welfare, the School of Nursing, and what was then called the School of Allied Health Professionals. We then evolved over the years under Dr. McTurnan and became the School of Health Technology and Management. So I just want to give you a little history about allied health professions. So as our professions grew, as the school grew, and reflected on our history, allied health professions were very much vocational professions. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, respiratory care therapists. We were sort of considered technicians, so we're at the level of certificates, associate degrees, a couple of bachelor's degrees. As we grew and we became a more integrative, important part of the healthcare team, so did our education, and so did how we fit into the healthcare team. So the term allied health profession has been a little bit outdated, because currently we all sort of work together. We work as a team, and everybody on that team, nobody's considered allied. Everybody on that team is considered as important as everybody else on that team. So these slides reflect some of that. I'm going to go through them a little bit more quickly, except to say that as we developed in the School of then Allied Health Professions to the School of Health Technology and Management, we started accelerating our degrees, bringing on faculty that were more versed in clinical science, clinical research. The School of Health Technology and Management was born in 1993, and that reflected the current state of the school at the time. So if you think about health technology and management, and where that sits now, when we think about what our students would be looking for, and they're looking for a career as a physical therapist, they might not look at health technology and management. They might look at computer science, engineering, or school of business. And so when I came on, one of the first charges of the faculty was, we've got to change the name of the school. We really have to change the name of the school. And we went through a process. In December 2021, we had representatives from each of our areas come together, create a list of potential names, and then we had a vote among all the faculty and staff of the school, including some input from the students, and we decided on the very generic name of the School of Health Professions, which is a very, very common name for a school that has our programs. We tried to be a little bit more creative, and it just didn't work. School of Health Professions is what it is. It's a School of Health Professions, and that aligned us with our General National Professional Association, which is the Association of Schools of Advancing Health Professions, which also recently changed its name from the Association of School of Allied Health Professions. So we were in alignment with a national initiative, and we were very pleased to be able to.
It sounds good too.
It's where you would go
Right,
if
right.
you were looking for that. So just as you understand, Stony Brook Medicine is made up of 5 health science schools: School of Health Professions, School of Medicine, School of Dentistry, School of Social Welfare, and School of Nursing. So everything except for medicine, dentistry, social work, and nursing are in our School of Health Professions. So over the last many years, we've grown to have 12 full programs with 22 different areas of study in our school. We carry the 3rd largest undergraduate major, health science, in our school, which has over 400 students, and the 6th largest graduate program, which is our physical therapy program, which is actually a clinical doctoral program. And so over the years, we've really increased in creating interprofessional healthcare and research and being innovative with a strong emphasis on providing workforce, especially in our area and especially after the pandemic. So just quickly, when I came here in 2020, we went and we underwent a new strategic plan that was aligned with the then Stony Brook strategic plan. We will revise that as Project Reach comes to its conclusion. The mission of the school is to provide the highest quality education in an interdisciplinary learning environment that fosters research, scholarly activity, critical thinking, evidence-based practice, leadership, and professionalism, while affirming the importance of ethical behavior, diversity, service, and team approach. And again, this was an initiative of the entire school. The entire school was involved with this and was unanimously voted upon in 2020 and is updated and revised and evaluated each academic year. This is our vision. These are our goals. I'm happy to provide these slides to you so that you can have them. Okay, so our programs, just wanted to give you an overall. So we have certificate, undergraduate, and graduate programs, and 1 doctoral program. These are our 22 or 3 programs. Our undergraduate programs, clinical lab science, respiratory care, and our health science program, which is our largest undergraduate program, allows students to get a general understanding of health sciences, and then they can break down into a clinical concentration or non-clinical concentration. Each of these is a year after they're awarded their bachelor's degree, and they are very, very profitable occupations. So anesthesia technology, medical dosimetry, radiation therapy, and radiological technology, or they can go into one of these non-clinical concentrations, which again give them a broader background in that individual area. Many of the students in the health science program use this as a stepping stone to graduate school, and we keep them here, and that's important because one of the things we're really conscious about is pipelining our undergraduate students into our many graduate programs. And these are our graduate programs: applied health informatics, athletic training, medical molecular biology, occupational therapy, physician assistant, speech language pathology, and physical therapy. I do want to note, and it's important, that many of these programs are duplicate here at Stony Brook in our Southampton campus. So we have the largest footprint of students on the Southampton campus. And so with Southampton Hospital coming on, we would like to be very involved so that we can make sure that we provide the needed workforce as that hospital comes on. So out at Southampton, we have occupational therapy, physician assistant, and physical therapy. They also have a cohort here at Stony Brook. And we have our brand new speech language pathology program, which we did a lovely ribbon cutting for last year. They'll have their first graduating class this year, and applied informatics, which is also at our
Stacy, all the programs in the middle, those are certificate programs after they get a bachelor's degree?
Yes, so they stay on for another year or so, and these are small niche programs, and some of these are in partnership with Mount Sinai, actually. Mount Sinai and Stony Brook, so they stay on for a year, and they get a certificate.
Many of the students who get the certificates, do they then get a job, or do they then go to get their master's?
Most of these people stay in the field, they get their certificates in. I would like to just note that accreditation is really important for us. Of these programs, 12 of them have accreditation. So we have 12 separate accreditors in our school, so we're constantly having to meet accreditations, and all of these programs, all those certificates are all accredited. And we need to maintain our accreditation so when our students graduate, they can get licensed to practice in that field.
You know, I'm just thinking out loud here. I don't know if it was on one of Judy's slides, but Governor Hochul also put maybe $350 million into, now it's going to be Empire State Development, just for workforce training. And it sounds like all your clinical programs are all about workforce training. And so maybe you could tap some of those dollars. I mean, they're promulgating the programs and the rules and regs. It's still new, but keep your eye out for that because there may be some opportunities.
We've actually spoken with Dr. Paz about that and hope to be involved in that. I'm going to show you really quickly some data about that might be helpful in that. So these are just some of the things that we expect our students to do. Again, I won't take your time and I'll provide these for you, but basically we really want well-rounded students. We don't want students that are just going to be researchers, just going to be scholars. We need our students to be clinicians, researchers, scholars, and be able to have what we call transferable skills, those skills that are important to a healthcare practitioner, being able to communicate, understanding diversity, working in teams. Those are not things that are taught like on an exam. They're implicit skills that we're trying to make very explicit so that our students are very well accepted and received. And this is sort of an example of that. What's really important for us is that our students have what's called the interprofessional competencies, and that includes being able to work in teams, communication, understanding their role in the healthcare team, and understanding values and ethics for interprofessional practice, while still being very understanding and having curricular content about the social determinants of health, which is what drives our healthcare environment. So just some numbers, we have 60 full-time faculty members, 52 are non-tenure track. So again, remembering that our school started as a vocational school, the majority of our faculty come to us as clinicians. They don't come as researchers, they don't come as teachers, they come as clinicians, and that's really important because basically we're teaching people to be clinicians, hands-on clinicians. We would like to increase our tenure track and our research enterprise, and we're working towards that. We have 116 adjuncts, 24 full-time staff, and 1 part-time staff.
There's a difference between in definitions of an adjunct and a non-tenure track?
Yeah,
Are
so a
they also
non-tenure
the same?
track faculty member, we also call them clinical faculty members, are folks who come on their full-time faculty, it's their primary job. Adjuncts are people who would come in and teach a part of a course or a course based on their level of expertise that we might not have as a full-time faculty member.
Got it.
So we are the largest of the HSC schools with Spring 22, a total of almost 1,300 students, 583 undergrad and 683 grads. So we represent a good portion of the HSCs and of the university. In 2021, we awarded 175 master's degrees, 492 bachelor's degrees, 130 doctoral and professional degrees, and 6 graduate certificates. So again, a pretty large number when you think about the university as a whole. Just want to share with you our graduation rates, remembering this was COVID, and that we actually had to graduate some students a little late, and we graduated some students early because they were needed in the workforce. Our respiratory care students, we accelerated them because they needed to join the workforce, but generally, our graduation rates are very, very high. And our licensing board rates, again, in those 12 accredited programs, students need to take a licensing exam to be able to practice in their field. And again, COVID year, but these are generally our licensing rates, 95 to 100% across our programs. And our employment data speaks for itself. So I'm convinced that this data has something to do with the ability of Stony Brook to be top rated in social mobility. This data, I'm sure, very strongly contributes to that.
Wonderful.
And just some rankings, because rankings are always important. Our OT program is ranked, this is a US News Report, the most recent rankings that we've gotten is number 42 out of 197 programs nationally. Our PT program is number 57 out of 239 nationally, and our physician assistant program is number 15 out of 170 programs nationally. And so just the workforce outlook, which I think to your point, Mr. Law, and to some of the other conversations that we've had about budget, these are 26-16 actuals where there was about, this bar here represents other sectors besides healthcare. And they expected there was a 3% increase, but in healthcare alone, in the healthcare sector, there were 20.5% increase in jobs availability. This data is prior to COVID. I would expect it to be a little higher here, but still 3 to 4% more jobs, 3 to 4 times more jobs in the healthcare sector. So that's really important for our students as they graduate, enter healthcare, and will have job opportunities. This is from the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, September 2021, and I think I've shared this with Dr. Paz and his group. These are the greatest percent changes in healthcare professions from 2020 to 2030. The things that you see in yellow are programs that we already have. That's a lot of programs, right? Right up there is, and the ones in green are opportunities for us to be able to still expand and contribute to the workforce. We've just requested a faculty position so that we can start a track and exercise science, so that we can help with this 39% need that will be from 2020 to 2030. So if you look at this, and again, I'm happy to provide this for you, there's a lot what we're doing and where we are providing workforce, but also still some really good opportunity for us to grow. Finally, just some things, and some of this has been mentioned in other presentations, and some areas that we'd like to try to get some advancement. But if you think about the future of healthcare, which is not really the future anymore, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, healthcare trackers, all these things, 3D printing, these are all things that we are incorporating into our curriculum, making sure when our students get out of here, they know all of this kind of stuff. They know about informatics, they know about data, so that they will have value-added education that will make them the best healthcare providers out there. And again, the future is now. Healthcare is customer-driven. We have to think about where healthcare is provided. I know Dr. Paz speaks often about the fact that Healthcare is moving out of brick and mortar. We are moving into the community. We want our students to be prepared for that. We want our students to understand the different modes of delivery, telehealth, all those other kinds of things. And we want them to have an understanding for all of these social factors, the importance of healthcare for children, the importance of increased personal responsibility, security, and also translating science into cure. And just some validators for our school to wrap this up. Our faculty are well-versed. They're clinicians, they're researchers, they're educators, they're fabulous, and I'm very proud of them. All our students in all our programs have some sort of clinical internship or externship prior to graduating, so they know what they're getting into. It's not just sitting in the classroom and listening to me or people like me. They're out there, it's hands-on, that's really important. We have some state-of-the-art facilities. We would like some more. Again, I echo what President McGinnis has said about some of our facilities on East Campus. Some of them are almost a little dangerous. And so we need to really update them to keep our students safe. We do have the ability to perform research, and we are slowly but steadily building our research enterprise. Our programs are all fully accredited. Our passing rates, as you saw in the licensing exams, exceed national standards. We work really hard with our students, all 1,200 of them plus, to give them professional development and academic planning and make sure that they are on the right roads. And we have some great career planning and professional development, not only for our students, but for our faculty as well. With that, any questions? I'm happy to answer. Yes?
Yeah, the area of EMTs and paramedics, could you tell
Yes, I
me a
can.
little bit about that?
Yeah,
Is
so
it-
we
is it
have
a growing area, I hope.
It's actually a growing area. EMTs and paramedics, or more paramedics, are now being considered physician extenders because we've got a shortage of physicians. We are going to unfortunately have to put our paramedic program on pause for a very, very minimal time because we've had a change in leadership. And we're actually going to be revamping the entire program so it'll meet the new needs of what the paramedic should be doing as time goes on in that new role of physician extender. But we do have a very active EMT program. We take 3 cohorts a year of EMTs, and we do really well with that. We will continue to do that, and we will upgrade the paramedic program. In the process actually of hiring somebody right now to be the new director.
How long a pause is that?
It's just going to be a few months. So we know there's a huge need not only in the hospital, but also in the community. So we just want to get it right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, just another quick comment to piggyback on Father Alex's comment. Just the allied health program that's on Stony Brook Southampton's campus. I mean, the campus is alive again, and that's important because that's a huge resource to the east end of the island.
Yeah, and we've been very anxious and willing to do anything we can to integrate into the Southampton community. President McGinnis came out there and did the windmill lighting with us, which we do. She's spoken at our speech language pathology ribbon cutting last year. Poured, but it was a lovely day. And I go out there frequently. I meet with the students, and if any of you would like to come and see the campus, we have some beautiful facilities there. I'd be happy to tour you.
Well, Dean Bropak, thank you so much. This is great. I think, if you remember, I think this is our 3rd one. I asked Judy for every meeting to put on a different dean and educate us about a different program that we don't really, maybe aren't all too familiar with. And I don't know about you, but I'm finding them very helpful, and I learned more today about the program than I knew before. So, thank you very much, and we'll continue to do that at each meeting, have a different dean explain a different program to us. So thanks again, Dean. Great job. All right, we got one last item on the agenda, and as you know, one of our primary principal roles as a student council, we have to approve changes to the student code of conduct. And we always have Adam Furtman who presents our changes. I don't know if Rick Gateau, our student czar, who really does an amazing job with all of our student affairs throughout the campus, wants to tee this up, or we're going to just go right to Adam.
Go right to
I
Adam.
think he said, if I can read words correctly.
I make
go
a
right
motion to
me.
let Adam
Thanks.
go earlier in the agenda in the future. He always gets stuck at the very end.
Well, it's the actual business of the council.
I understand.
But unfortunately, these are two pretty straightforward
I think so.
changes.
Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate that. I am a New Yorker, so I do know how to speak fast. As long as you can hear fast, we should be good
But
to go.
Adam's the only one who gets special meetings every summer, because usually right before
Because
September.
we run out of time and we have a million questions.
No, usually before September, before the students come in, they have to sign the student code of conduct. We always have to make one or two additional changes, and we may have to do that again in August of this semester. So not everybody gets their own special meeting like Adam. So, but we will move you up on the agenda next time.
Thank you so much. As Kevin indicated, we are anticipating some changes from the Department of Education this year related, once again, shockingly, to Title IX and sexual misconduct on college campuses. So from what I understood, we were supposed to have them in April. They are still not out yet. So we have no idea as to what the actual timeline for implementation or what even the changes in guidance will be. But so stay tuned for that, but we will definitely be in touch once we're ready to go with that. As Kevin indicated, we do have two relatively minor changes to the code for the upcoming year. One is related to our university probation sanction, where it does put limitations on the types of leadership positions students can hold if they are on that probation. In our current iteration of the code, we name a few student organizations as including but not limited to. We decided to go with a more generic statement this year of students placed on university probation may not hold executive board or leadership positions in recognized student organizations and or councils. So it's to simply make sure that we are encompassing of all student organizations and not name a few but not all. The second change is related to our appeals in our Title IX grievance procedure, which was written by attorneys, and we needed to make it a little bit more, no offense to the attorneys in the room, but we needed to make it a little bit more student friendly. So the proposal was to change, to take out the word stay of sanctions and make it submission of an appeal puts any sanctions on hold while the appeal decision is pending. Supportive measures remain available during a pending appeal. So again, it's to make the code simply more student friendly and consistent with the language in our other sections.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any comments, additions, revisions? All in favor?
Aye. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you this summer at some point.
Adam, thank you, and we will, but if we do a meeting in August, since it will only be the only item on the agenda, we'll do that via Zoom. And our next meeting, that Rachel will let us know, will be sometime in October. Do we have a date yet?
Not yet, it'll be end of September or beginning of October. So
Okay, so in the fall, we'll likely be in person. Knock on, is this wood? It's close.
Some kind of wood.
It's close.
Looks like wood.
And so let's see. Graduation is May 20th. If you've never come to a graduation, there are fun events, especially the May one, outside on the football field. And so you'll be getting emails about that. And does any other council member have any other business or issue they'd like to raise?
Just quickly, how are we doing with staffing at the hospital? I know a couple of our other meetings we talked about that, and are we starting to catch?
Well, we have
close
Pal
to
Dr.
here.
Paz, I'll turn it over to you.
So it continues to be a challenge in some areas, and we are covering all of our needs, but without a doubt we have to depend on per diem, and some areas like nursing, for example, are nationally a huge challenge. That's why our pipeline programs across the health sciences are so important, because a lot of the work we're doing now is encouraging our graduates to seek employment at Stony Brook University and Stony Brook Medicine in particular. We think this is a huge opportunity for us, and since many of these graduates come from our own communities across Long Island, it creates real win-wins.
Yeah. So you're still struggling along there, but
it's
making progress.
It's a national issue. And
yeah,
the other
I know everybody is. So.
And the other piece of it, of course, is what we call burnout in the industry, which are individuals who have been on the front line for the past almost 2.5 years now. Extraordinary stress, even post-traumatic stress disorder for some of these individuals. So we have a number of initiatives across Stony Brook Medicine to help with mental health issues, to help with well-being, because we understand that that's one of the most important things we can do for our workforce, and at the same time, that allows them to continue to be active workers.
Thanks, Al. And it's no secret that the Mets have the best record in the National League ever since Travis Jankowski, Stony Brook alum, joined the team in April. So let's go Mets. Maury, anything else? All right. So the meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you in September. Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.